We're going to take a closer look now at frog pose. Frog pose is a really strong pose for a lot of students, but the reality is it doesn't have to be. And so there is a variation here for everybody, and there is a way of practicing this that doesn't have to be so, let's say, aggressive, so forceful to create such strong sensation in this position. I know in the past when I've announced it in class, quite often students have sort of let out a little groan, but I think over time with re-education to show them there's an easy way of doing this, that attitude and that experience can definitely shift in their practice. So I'm going to use a blanket for this one. You could do this without a blanket, of course. You just be doubling the mat over onto itself to create a little bit of cushioning. So you just do that all along the side of the mat, maybe once, maybe even twice to create some cushioning for the knee. I'm just going to use a blanket here because it is a little bit more comfortable to use blankets if they are available to you. And then you're going to have a bolster out in front of you like so. Now it will depend on how much range you have. It will depend on how far you come into this pose. And so you may need a block or even two blocks. If you've got a little less range in your inner thigh and your adductors to be able to come into this position. So from here, we're going to keep our hips pretty much in line with the knees and open out those knees as wide as you can. So super, 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 super wide. And then we're going to allow our belly to come down onto the bolster like so. And with this little bit of support from the bolster, you can then start to relax down into a position that's comfortable for you. Now, quite often you've seen in the past that potentially they say, okay, now at this point, bring your hips back between your knees. That's not going to be relevant for everybody because you've got to remember what the target area is to get a sensation on the inner thigh. We don't need to copy a shape. So for some students, they'll actually get a compression point, again, greater trochanter, pressing into the acetabulum, part of the ilium, part of the pelvis. And in this way, you cannot change that. That's not something that you're ever going to be able to get better at. So allowing your hips to come forward a little bit could actually be a very comfortable position for students to come into. And it's tricky for us. I know initially I had trouble because I kept wanting people to have a position that looked right until I started to really talk to my students and realize they were still getting that sensation up that inner thigh, exactly where the target area is, but they weren't getting any of those compression points. Also good for people with a little less range to try something with the hips a little bit further forward. And then absolutely, if they don't have those compression points over time, they can start to bring their hips back. Now, what you'll see a lot though, is if some of your students don't quite have the range in that inner thigh, their knees will be more up like this. And so then when they drop down on top of the bolster, you're going to have this steep angle of the torso diving down into the bolster. And that means you're most likely going to get a bit of a compression point at the back of the neck then. So the cervical spine pressing into itself and it's going to collapse and be quite uncomfortable. We don't want that. And so it's very easy to be able to avoid. All you need to do is place a couple of blocks underneath the bolster like so. And then create a little bit more lift. And then as you come forward, even though you don't have that range to get the hips down as much, you can bring the ground closer to you, and that can be a position that your students can hold quite comfortably. Again, always an option to bring them into is tadpole. I do go through tadpole in a little bit more detail in another video. Feel free to watch that one. Or also frog up against the wall. So I'll just go through that just quickly for you. So when you're coming into frog up against the wall, you want to have about from your knee to your heel away from your wall. That's basically what we're looking for. And so the distance of my buttocks from the wall is about from my knee to my heel away from the wall. And so that's going to allow me to have a feeling of pretty much just sitting in a chair. Then we're going to open those feet out to the side like so. And so in the final pose, you want to have the heels pretty much in line with the knees. So instead of up the wall like that, heels pretty much in line with the knees. Shins are then parallel with the ground. And with those knees opening out, you get this nice big juicy sensation all up through that inner thigh. And that's going to be a very comfy frog pose. Now, you might notice that you get a little bit of those compression points again. I would initially move forward and back. So maybe shift the bum back just a little bit away from the wall and just change that. And maybe you're starting to get a place that's free of compression, maybe not. Maybe you need to bring the feet a little bit closer Maybe those heels go up the wall a little bit, that's okay. Or failing that, use a block or blocks, and you're just going to place them underneath the knee, like so. And that's going to just create a little bit of a support for them so they don't have to go as far. Tuck them right underneath the hips or something like that. Coming out, legs up against the wall or knees into the chest, whatever works for you as a rebound there. And generally speaking, coming out of a frog pose, the easiest way I found of coming straight out of it is, instead of shifting everything, just come forward. So just allow your torso to come forward and shoot your legs back. And very minimal effort to actually be able to find a rebound position in this pose. And dropping the head down, just relaxing. Now the target area in this position is going to be your adductors on your inner thigh. And those adductors are then going to be your liver pathway in Chinese medicine. You might feel a secondary sensation around the side of the hip into your glute med, glute max area, and that's going to be into your gallbladder. And that's your frog pose.